medical issues, or you want to do some studying, or you take your kids to school, or many times you return to the U.S. and you take care of these kind of issues. And so I used to call that furlough in those days when I was doing it. And they're staying at the Walnut Street Baptist Church now before they go back. They came in January, and they'll tell you when they're going to be going back and what things are like in Laos and the challenge there. But don't forget, after the service, hang around and talk with them and ask some questions, and maybe learn some words in Laotian?
Laotian, yes.
Yeah, okay. And check our missionary information board out there. There's all kinds of opportunities for you to get involved in missions, either as a person, individually, or with a group, or as a church. So please do that. Next week, or rather in 2 weeks, we should be having Diana Cahill from the New Hope Pregnancy Center, and there's a challenge. And then in July, we should be having Brad Willis from the Infant Resources coming to speak to us. So we're happy to have folks come here on our Wednesday missions night. So here's Brother Chang.
Good evening, everybody. This is not something that I do usually. Mission report. This is actually the first time I'm doing a sabbatical. And I'm going to kind of get you up to speed with everything that we've been doing over there. So first of all, we are serving in Laos. Some people might call it Laos. Trust me, before I went out there, I didn't even know where it was on the map. And I had a difficult time explaining it to everyone that wanted to know exactly what I didn't know. So just wanted to give you an introduction first. My name is Brian Chang. Ethnically, I'm Korean, from South Korea. My mom and dad, they grew up there, and then I was born in Korea. When I was 1 year old, baby, we came from South Korea to Washington, D.C. My dad wanted to study political science. So ethnically, I'm Korean. Culturally, I'm American. My accent should give that off, that I have kind of like two things going on in me. And also, my mother, she couldn't come here. She is an IMB career missionary. She was sent by IMB to China, I want to say 2005. And they served, my mother and my father, they both served there for about 7 to 8 years. And they absolutely loved it. They learned the language. For them, it was a little easier because they learned some like basic Chinese characters in Korea. And for them, they caught it on pretty quick. Chinese is really tough. I don't know if any of you ever tried to learn a new language. Chinese will definitely discourage you. But let me get more into about Laos. And this is my wife, Tang Chi. She is originally from northeast India. So if you think about India, there is a northeastern part, which I did not know about, which is predominantly Christian. And when I heard that, I was thinking, interesting. I thought India was just full of Muslims and Hindus. But in the northeastern part, there are a lot of Christians. I went to her hometown, and a lot of Baptist churches, some Catholic churches, really depended upon the missionaries that had went out there and actually planted the seeds. Some parts of Northeast are Presbyterian, so it really depended on the missionary that went there. So even the denomination carries over overseas, which is interesting. So she's from Northeast India. My mother couldn't be here because she is going through some dizziness, nausea. We're trying to figure out where it's coming from, but she had back surgery in February of this year. So it's not really related to that. She's recovered from that physically, and she really wanted to be here and see you guys and give her testimony as well. But if you guys could pray for her to recover, that'd be great. My father passed away on the field while he was in China. So he got the news that he had stomach cancer, and it was when it was stage 4. So if you know that, that's kind of like the very late stages of being able to eradicate the cancer. So he passed away, but by the grace of God, he didn't really suffer much pain. He only had Tylenol till his dying day. And I've heard that stomach cancer is very excruciating. So my dad, he served and he passed away on the field as an IMB missionary. My mother came back to the States from China, and she thought she would join me in ministry. At that time, I was studying at Boyce College over by the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, and I wanted to do addictions ministry. My mom was thinking, I don't know if I can go back into the mission field. My dad was doing all the technological things in terms of corresponding with IMB. So she would prod me and say, Brian, do you want to go to China with me? I would say, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I am not going to China with you. I did visit them maybe about a few times. I loved it there, but I did not see myself going overseas to do missions. I absolutely did not. I've lived and grew up here in the States way too much to sacrifice the conveniences that I've, and it's not to put it that way, but more so in terms of if you go into a new setting, there's like a lot of stretching of yourself that you're going to be facing in terms of experience and culture, people, all that stuff. So while I was starting my counseling degree there, I guess God started working on me. My mom kept prodding me, and there was kind of like the sympathy card being played there because my mom was starting to get depressed. Some people who have been missionaries on the mission field begin to become depressed if they are not on the mission field. They find that, I think it was more in terms of evangelizing. My mom is like a huge evangelism warrior. She would just, if there was anyone that she had opportunity to talk to about Jesus, whether it be the taxi driver, the bus driver, the person sitting next to her in the subway, just someone sitting on the park bench, whoever it was, she would just break out the gospel and share. And in China, it was actually a lot easier than I had expected because they're listening. It's a very atheistic country, more than I had ever thought. And for them, hearing about Jesus, it's like they are seriously zoned in on you as soon as you start talking about spiritual matters. But of course, if you know anything about China, it's very strict in terms of government and sharing the gospel. You want to kind of do that on the down low, and there's a lot of persecution going on there. Maybe heavier persecution these days from what I've heard. So all of us, my wife, me, and my mother, we served in Laos for 3 years, and that was starting in 2016. Chang, my wife, she served there for 4 years. She was there 1 year ahead of us, my mother and me. So just to backtrack, my mother God convinced me to go to mission, and I made that decision to go to mission with her. IMB decided to relocate her from, not to go back to China, but to go into Laos. And I decided to go independently. At that time, I didn't have the requirements fulfilled to be an IMB missionary. So I just thought to myself, okay, this is a time to grow. And I really thought, I'm gonna face a lot of inconveniences, let alone living with my mother again. This I don't know, and I'm not demeaning anyone that live with their family, beyond a certain age, but I just had this rebellion that just would not go away. I mean, it would subside as you get older, grow into maturity, but I wasn't looking to dig up the old skeletons again that I had with my parents. So so it was tough, but still we went to Laos in 2016, and everything just started coming into place. The next slide, actually, will show you my mom and dad. So my mom and dad, I think this is a picture back in China when they were serving, and they both served in IMB for, I think, somewhere around 7 to 8 years. Yeah, and let me see. I'm gonna introduce my wife a little bit. She actually, once she went into Laos, she started serving or started working in Laos as an English teacher. So if you guys are ever interested in teaching English overseas, you guys are very welcome. Just shoot me an email, which should be at the very last slide. They are just wanting to learn English very badly over there. And when they hear an American accent, you're in. You are pretty much in. This was like the reality for China too. Like any of these East or Southeast Asian countries, they just really love the Western culture. So if it's anything about learning English, they're just hopping right onto it. So my wife, she started teaching English in a language school called Logos College. And Logos College was started by a missionary couple that originally came from Korea, and they built this school from ground up. And they have a lot of students there learning, Laos students there learning English, starting from maybe like elementary school all the way up to college level. So there's a lot of students coming in through this school. And the next slide shows you a picture of Chang. She's right in the middle with the flowery shirt, and she's surrounded by her students. So she teaches college level students there. And for me, I teach the secondary level students, the high school level students, and she really has a fun time just making relationship with her students. And Lao people are very friendly, and they're very humble at heart. So it's just very easy to interact with them, but at the same time, very shy. So unless we're intentional about it, about making relationships, they might just remain quiet right in front of you forever, but in their hearts, they're just bursting with wanting to make that connection. So she has taught the college level for some time. And during the time, we didn't know each other before we started teaching at that college. We met there for the first time in 2016. I did a lecture there. She was sitting somewhere around here too, and eventually we started to get to know each other. In my second year of staying in Laos, we started dating, and a few months later, on April 23rd, 2017, the next slide, we got engaged in Laos, and this was an engagement ceremony that the international church had for us and prepared for us. Very kind of them. And at the end of that same year, we got married on December 29, 2017. And we actually did get married in Laos, and this is a picture from that. So if there has ever been a miracle in my life that God had orchestrated, it was just finding her there, or finding each other there. We didn't come to Laos to get married, but it happened, and I'm so thankful it happened because I am getting close to 40, all right, and she was about getting close to 40, so we're thinking, okay, all right, we're gonna have each other. Beyond 40, we were worried that no one was gonna have us, so God worked it in at the last moment, just like Abraham and Sarah. So that was by the grace of God, and God is amazing, absolutely. The next slide is just a picture of, a little dramatic, but it was just a picture that we had taken after our IMB church planning training that went on in Bangkok. So, geography. I didn't even tell you guys where Laos is. If you guys know where China is, you might have an idea where Laos is. Laos is considered one of the countries in Southeast Asia. So on the north of Laos, actually the northern border touches China. The eastern border touches Vietnam. The southern and the southwestern border touches Thailand. And then the northwestern border touches Myanmar. So yes, just like Mr. Miller said, it's landlocked. So when we talk about, when we teach students things about geography and we talk about sea and ocean, they have no idea what we're talking about because their reality has just been in their country. They don't travel that much either, considering that it's a third world country still developing. So That was the training in Bangkok Church, and kind of like a send-off after the training, you're going to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth and start planting churches. So just to go more into Laos now, to get you guys familiar, let me introduce you a little bit about the country. So one of the first things you probably think about of Laos, what kind of clothes do they wear? What kind of food do they eat? What kind of cultures or traditions do they have that you can visually notice? So this picture is actually a picture from I don't know how long ago. This is pretty much the traditional wear of women. They have, the skirts are called Laos sin. And these sins are quite long with specific patterns emphasizing something. The next picture is a more modern picture, and it's not really, amazingly, not really that different from the traditional wear of women that they're having now. This is also Laotian, but this is more of the formal wear that they would put on for maybe work or some occasions and such. So we really love this about their traditional clothes. It's very conservative, and just seeing long skirts was just very fascinating to me, especially in a hot country. It's very hot out there. My wife is from India. If you know anything about India, it's hot. Laos is hotter, okay? Laos is hotter. And the next one is a picture of the food. Their basic staple is sticky rice and papaya salad. So papaya, like tropical fruits, it's amazing out there. If there's anything that I love about Laos or Southeast Asia, it's just how amazing the produce is, and you don't have to question so much about how much of it has been processed or genetically modified and such. So papaya salad, barbecue stuff, very basic staple foods in Laos. And they eat with their hands. They're also good with forks and spoons and chopsticks, so they're very versatile. I was very amazed. The next picture is a picture of morning alms. So this is offerings. This is like offering time early in the morning. So Buddhism is the predominant religion of Laos, or most of Southeast Asia, I would say. And these are the monks that come out every early morning with their baskets, and then people are pretty much giving their offerings in a line, little by little. And these monks pretty much live off of the offerings that they receive from the people that are waiting for them on the streets. This offering is pretty much a transfer of good works. So their Buddhism is Theravada Buddhism, and basically they're just how do I say it? Just pushing forth on the good works, so that if they believe that their afterlife would depend on how they live now, this is a part of how they are living a merit-based life for good blessings and good merit and good works. The next picture is just one of the many temples that we saw immediately we came to Laos. Just as we would see churches down the street here and there, you would see temples like this here and there. And we live in the capital, so it is a very touristy place. So there is this sense in which we see these temples, and it's like, oh, this is interesting architecture of their culture. But we need to also be reminded this is a place of worship that these Lao people are going to, so that they can push more for their good works and whatever that they're doing in their praying and doing ceremonies and such. So we're always reminded by seeing these temples what we are to do in Laos. The next one just gives you a little bit more of the demographic statistic information about Laos. Laos, the population is about 7 million people total in the country of Laos, and it has 128 different people groups. So interestingly, if you go far enough into different parts of Laos, they do not speak the same language, and they don't know how to speak to each other, maybe across different border lines of their villages or districts or whatever. Christians are about 3.6%, so it's pretty low, but still a little higher than from the statistics from the years past. The government of Laos is communist, So there is persecution of Christians going all throughout the country. And however, the great news is the government actually allows for registered churches. And these registered churches are actually led by native Lao people. So the great thing is their registered churches are called the LEC, the Lao Evangelical Church. So a very interesting thing came up into my mind, how a predominantly Buddhist country government would allow for a registered church with the name evangelical in there, led by Lao people. But the more that we had relationship with them, their worship style and their fellowship and the way that they have just a structure, church ecclesiology is very Western, and we have people telling us, okay, you don't want to get too close to these people because they're just tied in with the government. And it's true. The government wants to have a huge sense of control when it comes to religion especially. So we're still making relationships because these registered churches do have the legal freedom to go out to the villages, evangelize, and bring them to the churches, which is a beautiful thing. But at the same time, the missionaries that are out there are a bit skeptical about how safe it is to be able to work with these people, with the registered churches as well. So it's a very fine line to kind of go across. What else? Yes, Buddhism is predominantly the main religion, a little mix of animism and ancestor worship, which usually you find from here and there in parts of Asia. And Laos, I told you where that is, Southeast Asia. The next slide is a picture of just a simple street in the capital, Vientiane. So this is the city that we live in. So here, just by the looks of it, it looks a little congested, and it really is. Back then, when they did the city planning, they did not think of having so many cars come into the city, and back then it was just mostly motorbikes and bicycles. So a lot of parking is happening on the sidewalks. The monks are just walking down the street. The population of Vientiane, the capital that we live in, is really close to the population of Louisville, which is about 700,000 people. And in the capital, there is a lot more freedom to share the gospel than the countryside. So if you go into the countryside, the population becomes less because these villages are kind of places where as soon as a foreigner comes in or an outsider comes into the village, everyone in the village knows that you're there on the same day and knows what your business is because they're very tight-knit and very close that way. You don't have many tourists going into the villages. So in the big cities, you can definitely do some evangelism, which is great. In the villages, not so much. There's a lot of policing going on. People know what you're up to if you're there for more than 2 or 3 days, which is why we love short-term mission people because they're just in and out anyway. So we just kind of like send them to the villages, just spread tracts, and then just share the gospel and get out of there. Another way to really spread the seed of the gospel so that no one really gets into any like legal troubles with the police. So yes, we're in the city of Vientiane. The Lao people, they have a great respect for elders, a great respect for religious images, monks and family, village authorities. As a people, they have a very, how should I say it? Like they have a great sense of personal moral duty. So in East Asia, what we would call it, I think in sociology, would be like a collectivistic communal society versus the Western culture or society is more individualistic. And over there, you kind of see how everyone is just really tight-knit with the families. So there is a great respect for ancestors, a great respect for elders, and things to be passed on from generation to generation. And Lao people, culturally, they have this strong sense of muan. Muan is their word for fun or happiness or happy contentment. So that would be another reason why they appear to be friendly to most everyone. So it's very welcoming for people to just come there and just interact with people, because they have this life philosophy of happiness. And a lot of people are just coming from all over the world to figure out, why are these people so happy? In contrast to their sense of being lackadaisical, I don't want to use the word lazy, okay? This is the first word that comes to mind from Westerners coming into Laos and looking at Lao people, and we say, these people are kind of lazy in the way that they work, in the way that they live. But the more that we've gotten to understand Lao people, we're finding it's not about lazy, they're just more easygoing, more laid back. They're not so stressed out about like a really rigid schedule as we might have here in the Western culture of things, because sometimes we find value in having a busy schedule, and if we don't have a busy schedule, then our value in life kind of decreases because we don't have much going on in our lives. For the Lao people, everything is cool. Everything is cool. And when we see this from my Western eyes, I mean, I grew up mostly in Chicago, but having grown up here and then going over there, culture shock really makes my eyes look at them from a very skeptical, cynical point of view. Like, I would say lazy right off the bat. And sometimes the culture that cultures are imposed on each other as relationships grow. And unfortunately, understanding has to come from that, so that's a big part of missions. And sometimes, the observations of them being lazy, we're starting to grow into changing that. They're more easygoing. They don't save money. They only make enough for that year or for that season. And if that's enough, that's it. They'll do some like handicrafts or some side business just for like some pocket change, but they don't have bank accounts where they're really concerned about the future of 5-10 years later down the line. So we see that, and we're learning from that as well. The next slide. Just to touch on the Western culture and the Eastern culture, there's something that I'm still learning. We've only been there for 3 years. She's been there for 4. But for me, there's a lot of learning that I have to do in terms of this. The Western society or the Western cultures, they view life, or they have a worldview through a guilt-innocence lens. So the way that we perceive, behave, and do things, like a main question would be like this: is what I'm doing fair or unfair? It's very individualistic. The way that we process and the way that we think, the Western culture, Western society is marked by individual conscience. So when we're sharing the gospel here, it's a personal choice. It's a personal choice. People just look into themselves and think, is this what I'm going to believe or not? Because this is just something that I'm going to choose to do. For the Eastern societies, we call it the shame-honor worldview. It's like a shame-honor society. Their questioning is more along the lines of, am I going to look ashamed if I do this? Or how will people look at me if I do that? There's a different kind of consideration in how they think about doing things or thinking things. It's very collectivistic and communal, and that's this society. Eastern societies are marked by honor, and it's really about appearances. Just the same way as like, how are you doing? Oh, I'm okay. It's kind of like upholding this, outer appearance that everything is fine, and it carries through in that way too. They also call it the face culture. So if you lose honor, it's called losing face. You don't want to lose face. And I find this interesting. Lao people have a hard time saying no, and they always say yes. And that's not 100%, but I'm saying for the most part, they say yes. Because saying no implies many things. Kind of losing face or losing honor, saying, no, I don't understand that. No, I don't agree. No, I don't know how to do it. Please explain it to me again. That's the worst one. If you're a boss And then your employee, who is Lao, says yes to everything that you say, and they have no idea what you just told them to do, it's very frustrating. So a lot of things that we need to like change the way that we see how they see life kind of falls in line with this. And there's this third portion called fear, like a fear power worldview. I think this is a little bit more ancient. This is where societies are more structured by power and authority. So their questioning will be along the lines of, will someone hurt me if I do this? Or will someone kind of come down on me if I think this way? So this is a consideration for worldview. And sometimes when we share the gospel, we have to think more along these terms of honor and shame, not guilt or innocence. And when we're talking about the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, forgiveness of your sins, that becomes more personal. But we need to like kind of broaden that a little more. And I have a video towards the end of this kind of like opens up how to share the gospel to the Eastern cultures. If we have time, if we don't, then you can send me an email and I can send you a link. The next slide is just like a basic overview of how different countries or different parts of the world are shaped by how they see the world, either through guilt, innocence, or fear or shame. So it's mostly guilt or shame based. So I think the gray areas kind of mean they're still in the works of trying to get that information. So just to give you an idea of different ways that different parts of the world looks at life and looks at just people and things in general. The next slide is a slide of my wife and one of her very close Lao friends that really, they just hit it off. I don't exactly remember how you guys met, but they have become closest of friends. She has shared the gospel with her many times, and she has rejected it many times, but the relationship is still strong. We're finding that in Laos, this Buddhist cultures is very difficult to win people over to Christ. If you're going to China, it seems a little different because China, there might be parts of China that are Buddhist, but the way that they think about religious matters and stuff are very detached from practical life living. So in Laos, culturally, they are Buddhist. In the same way Muslims, they're culturally Muslim, not just religiously. Their identity is kind of ingrained in what they believe and what they think. And for Lao people, relationship is key. It seems to be very key in Buddhist nations. So Hong is her name, Tangchi's friend, and we continue to pray for her that she will eventually be very curious about who Jesus is and who God is and such. The next slide it was actually her student. His name is Utipon. And I substituted for this class a couple times, and we just took a picture. And he really likes us. There's something about people that God sends to you that just draws to you. And we shared the gospel with him, 2 times? Maybe 2 or 3 times already. And he's rejected it every time. But still, he's just really clinging onto us very hard. He's just constantly texting us, when are we going back to Laos while we're in the States. These people are just waiting for us. And we can present the gospel to them in many different ways, especially through relationship. We want to get to know their problems. What are they going through in life? And how can we minister to them? And what the Bible says to people, to hurting people, and how the gospel can really heal. So he is another one that just really we are praying for. The next slide is a Christmas party that we had before we came here. We just called up a bunch of students that could come, and we just had dinner with them. We just had some games. We just have a lot of conversation. We broke out the balloon animals, and it was a good time. We sang some songs. Of course, Christmas And Easter are huge here, and Christmas and Easter are huge for us over there, because they know of it as an international level holiday. So what a great way for us to explain to them why it is a great holiday. So we sang some Christmas songs. One of the girls actually started to show some interest in what it means to be a Christian. Her grandmother is Catholic, I think, but the rest of her family is Buddhist. But there are some things that, these kids might hear from here and there as like a seed of what the gospel is, and they grow into this curiosity. So when we go back, we're just going to be talking to her very, very closely. The next slide. One of our top students, we just invited over for dinner as well. We just had a good time. They're very smart. They think very critically compared to other Laos students. So for them, it was more of an apologetic kind of conversation, but still, it was very challenging, and is always challenging for them as well. And they really like to just have just hangout times with us. The next one. This is a primary or preschool. One of the short-term teams that came from San Francisco connected with one of these schools, and this is the actual VBS that's going on in Laos. And this is great. So you'll see how it's very jam-packed in here. So this is just like the basic feel of how Laos schools are, even for middle school and for secondary level high school students. Resources are very sparse. Teachers need more training. Education is still in reform. And what a great opportunity for us to come in and present them with some English material. It's just English learning material, and then share gospel stories, Bible stories with them in the process so that they can think about it while learning English. The next slide. My mother, Tang Chi, and me were all having dinner with a couple of Lao friends of ours, and my mom really evangelized to these two very earnestly, and they're still thinking about it. And these guys kind of break my mom's heart, because the girl is very aggressive, not aggressive, she's a thinker between these two. And she pretty much falls back to, what is her mom gonna think about her if she believes in Jesus, if she converts to Christianity? So if you think about persecution, it is not just coming from the government. It hits home. If you are converting to Christ, just like if you've ever heard anything about Muslims converting to Christ, you are going to be persecuted at home by your mother or father or family members, because you are pretty much showing yourself or risking yourself to be outcasted, because there is no harmony anymore. Being Buddhist, some parts of Buddhism requires their children to do good works at the temple to monks, so that their parents can be ushered off into either heaven or ushered off into the next afterlife, or something along those lines. There's a lot of harmony, and it feels like a trap for them if they realize that maybe the gospel is true, and everything about their life is going to have to change. It's not a personal decision anymore, because the family is going to be so involved. So even in the IMB training, they told us, if you can, you want to reach out to the father, the head of the household. Because once the head of the household is converted, then the whole household is converted. This is pretty much, Bible stuff that you read in Acts, households being converted, because basically it really depends on who is the head. And then even if the household changed, then you don't have that family being in safety. You have the village coming down on you now. You have the village coming down on you. You have the village head. Whatever the case may be, it just continues. So as soon as we start to see conversion, we must immediately start ministering to them about how to go through the persecution right away in a very God-honoring and strong and confident way. Because the enemy just is right there on the border of conversion, is right there waiting in the forms of family and friends. So we definitely continue to pray for relationships and how they can continue to ask us these questions. The next one is all the way to your left is my mom's insurance guy. She got into a pretty rough accident in a mall parking lot, and she got hooked up with this guy, very, very cool guy. His English is so-so, but still, because of that, we're able to communicate with him. He was a monk in his younger years. They call young monks novices. So he spent some monkship for some years up to his high school time. And then once he started working for the insurance company, which is a really good one, he started having questions about what all these other religions mean and what they are. And he remembers some gospel songs. I don't remember what he said he remembered, but there were some gospel songs that he had heard in passing that just continued to just flow into his head, and it would not just go away. And as soon as my mom had evangelized to him, he just started pouring out. I was like, what's the song that I heard? I don't know what this song was. And then he can't even sing it, but he just knows, he knows the lyrics. So my mom went through great lengths in finding what song or songs that he was thinking about. And then as soon as it started clicking, this is the first conversion that we had through my mom over there in Laos. And we praise God for that. This actually is a picture of his graduation. He graduated pretty late, but they're still graduating. I forgot what kind of bachelor's degree it was while he was working. So we praise God for that. We're still praying for his wife. His wife hasn't converted yet, and his children are going to church now and there. So yeah, we just continue to pray for him, and we see like he's really showing some fruit and continuing to be curious about what it means to be a Christian. The next slide. This is the last slide, but there's just a few things that I just want to go over, before going into Q&A. There are some challenges that we faced as missionaries. And I hate to say this, but maybe you've heard of it. One of the challenges, not that we've personally faced, but we were on the fringes of facing it, was getting along with other missionaries. This is for real. Some missionaries come back home and they would probably tell you that it was some kind of reason here or that, but sometimes missionaries just can't get along. There's a lot of pride and jealousy when it comes to evangelizing and discipling. So when we're kind of stripped out from our usual places of geography or worship or just church, there's a sense in which that we're just doing these things on our own out there. And that kind of corrodes in our spirit, and we just need to pray that God is just ever more present with us, because we just need to get that encouragement from each other. We don't have that church body that you guys are so blessed with, to be encouraged by one another within church members, with family, and small groups or whatnot. So getting along with other missionaries, there's some discipleship that's going on, but through employment. So sometimes that looks to be a little iffy. We're paying some Lao students, not us, but I'm just saying there's this culture of we're going to hire some Lao students who are interested in working with us, and at the same time we're going to do Bible study with them. So when money gets into the matters, it gets kind of sketchy, but still, whatever way the gospel can go, we pray that God uses it for his glory and in a very God-honoring way. Easy believism. When it comes to Buddhism, some people, they like to say yes to many other religions. So if they say yes to Christ and yes to Jesus, sometimes we have to evaluate that yes, because that might just mean that we're just going to add Christ to the many other idols that we have in our life. So sometimes we can't get too excited right away. We want to push forward in the discipleship and really follow up with them through Bible study and just living life with them. Cultural challenges, consideration of time. I'm sure if I was going to come to your all's houses, you would want me to tell you ahead of time. Sometimes they don't let us know in Laos. They just come up because this is their culture, open doors. Very, very communal, very neighborly. So sometimes they'll just show up, or sometimes they'll show up an hour late from the appointment, 2 hours late, 3, 4, 5, 6. We don't know. Sometimes we'll get the call the next day. We're sorry we didn't come. And sometimes we are we've cooked a huge meal for them and had many things prepared. And we pray that the resentment doesn't start sinking in. Cultural shock, culture shock. This is what we go through. But still, we're learning this, and we've learned kind of recently. We don't start cooking until they come. Okay, we don't start cooking until they come. And even within the Lao people themselves, this is what they do, and they help cook. So, that's great. Something that we need to continue to learn. Their sense of muan, I told you about happy contentment. They love partying, loud music, drinking. They just love it. They absolutely love it. Whenever they have the time, they don't even need a holiday. They don't need a Friday. They don't need a Saturday or Sunday. Just in the middle of the week, the music is loud and the beer is flowing. And I'm sure, and even as I say that, it just doesn't sound good. But this is just how they enjoy life. And I'm not trying to defend, the way that they're enjoying life. But at the same time, this is something that we're culturally trying to get used to, because sometimes the music is too loud, right? And we're getting used to that. And yes, this thing about saying yes all the time gets a little frustrating too. So I guess an encouragement for you guys don't necessarily have to go out on missions. I realize this while I'm out there, that I could be doing the same thing here that I'm doing out there, just making relationships, intentional about getting to God somewhere in my conversations, especially when they're talking about their life problems, because all of us go through some issues one way or another as it surfaces, and then we have that opportunity to tell them these problems are for a reason. God is trying to wake us up from the way that we think about life and how we are so self-sufficient in the way that we are just doing things day to day. So yeah, I encourage you guys to bring up Jesus as much as you can in conversations, because even for us, even especially for me, I grew up here and all of my friends were Christian. It's not an easy thing. If it's not natural at home for me, if it's not natural among my friends or coworkers, it's never going to become natural. I have to make it natural. They must realize that as soon as I'm coming towards them, it's like, oh, here's Brian again with his Bible verses and Jesus. But are they going to really reject a person who's just really caring and loving? I mean, seriously. Like, there's so much about how are other people going to think about me, kind of thing that continues to carry on, even for my wife and me. It's like, we don't want to break the relationship. It's just going so well. We don't want to scare them away. No, we can continue to love them. That's the thing. We just trust God that He's just ever with us wherever we go. So thank you guys so much. I pray that you guys pray for us as we continue. We're going to be going back in July 20th. And especially praying for my mom that her health is okay for her to go back with us in July. So 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 1, finally. Brothers, pray for us that the word of the Lord may speed ahead and be honored as happening among you. Should I open up for questions? Okay, so yes, please, any questions, any and all questions, I'm so eager. Yes. You mean over there in Laos? We can't really have a building unless we're actually with the registered church. But international, like foreigners, can actually have their own services in their own houses, private houses, or in store shops, as long as we're not actually inviting Lao people. So it gets dicey when we're inviting the natives to our services, but we do attend a international church, predominantly Filipino, but there are like Western churches, Korean churches, Filipino, all these, like in the capital, we have everyone there. And also this is a good question, you can actually set up your church as long as you're registered with the government. I see Seventh-day Adventists there. I see Catholic churches there. I see mosques there. I was really blown away. I really was blown away. So yeah, any questions about Laos or the work, or yes? Right. For me, I'm independent. So for me, it's just anytime, because I really wish there was some accountability for me on my part in terms of a church. I am with Walnut Street Baptist as a member, but as I've grown up in Chicago, we don't have many Southern Baptist churches up there, and the one that I was in kind of dwindled because of many issues, so I kind of grew up without a sending church. But my wife, she's with Garo Baptist Convention, so there's like a convention of Baptist churches that she's accounted for. My mom with the IMB. So I'm pretty much sticking to whoever needs to go back, on furlough or sabbatical. I think for IMB, about every 4 years, missionaries do come back to the States, and it's really up to them if they do want to come back, but it's a good thing, kind of like refocus, when we're back here, instead of just being trenched up there the whole time. Yes. Oh, as far as states, that's a good question. Florida, I'm thinking maybe a little bigger than Florida. I would have to check up on that. But yeah, it's not that big. It's not that big. Yeah. Plus, a population of 7 million. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but it's probably bigger than Florida. But yeah, a lot of the population obviously is concentrated in the bigger cities. So a lot of outlying villages that aren't so populated. But yeah, not that big. Yeah. Yes. No. I know there is some Buddhism that are very resistive and very aggressive sometimes too. The ones that we have faced so far, very friendly, very open-minded, but not so open-minded that they're going to convert on the spot or anything like that. But if we do want to share the gospel with them, they'll listen, and we can give them a track and have them think about something. And for them, it's a personal commitment for them, and more of a family commitment as well. So they can come out of the monkship if they please, anytime that they want to. And we've seen that with some of the students that we teach. I think one of your students, I don't remember, it was a long time ago, and I was like, you said, all of a sudden he wasn't a monk anymore, he just had his uniform on. Because monks have to wear their robe everywhere they go. Very simple. But all of a sudden, when we see them in regular clothes, it's like, oh, what just happened here? Maybe they want to get married or something. Or he started dating someone. There we go. Yes, he started dating someone. Okay, yeah. So it's not as aggressive or strict, but you don't have to be. In such a nation where Buddhism is just so part of cultural identity, it just carries on. It doesn't need to have pillars of Buddhist scholars and such like that. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
When you go back to July, you go back to the same house, like your house or wherever you lived there in December.
Oh, will we go back in the same place or the same residence? We will. Right now, we've pretty much stored up everything at my mom's place. She kind of rented this townhome-looking apartment. The landlord gets drunk every once in a while, so sometimes we don't get to talk to him in a sober state. But with the little communication that we have, our stuff is kind of safe there. But yeah, we'll probably move according to where we're going to work, because public transportation is not that great over there. They have these tricycle, not a tricycle, but three-wheel motorcycle-looking things called tuk-tuks. And that's their mode of transportation, but otherwise there's a lot of driving or walking. Not many people walk, it's so hot. So residence is very key. So we're looking for a place as soon as we get back to. Yeah. Yes?
There are some missionaries that have to hire local people to make a relationship. Do you all have that same thing?
We might look for that right now because my mom needs some help. And I'm going to start getting busy, as so she will. But yes, our neighbors do hire, we call them maidbans. They're maids or they're house workers that come, and then sometimes they live with the family, but just to be paid to like clean, watch over things, cook even, those kind of stuff. And there's a lot of discipleship that goes along there, and which is great opportunity as well. Yeah, and seeing that sometimes the government and the people of Laos will question, us when we go there. Why are you here? And if we can't answer that properly, without trying to tiptoe around the bush that we are missionaries, we've come here to share Christ, we can't say that. But we're probably gonna have to say, oh, we work at this school, or we have connections with this NGO, or something like that. It gets a little iffy. So if you know anything about business as mission, a lot of people are going there setting up businesses as a platform to contribute to the city, to the Lao people, to the government, kind of as like a beacon or not a beacon, but kind of as, okay, we're here legitimately for a business reason. And anything that happens on the sidelines from our business, it can be looked over. There's the soccer ministry that's going on there, which is very interesting. They are training Lao students to be great soccer players at the FIFA level. So because of the great soccer training, they are known, because they know that they're known by the government and have good relations with the government, the Ministry of Sports and Education. The government overlooks a lot of the evangelism and discipleship that happens there at that center. And even on the walls, you see paintings of Bible stories. And it's amazing, yeah. So there are ways to make it work. There are ways to make it work because the government overlooks it. They just do. They see that, you put forth something that's benefiting everyone in their country. Then how can they, kind of drive you away? They can, but I think there's something that we play along with that.
Like if the government decides to not overlook it, like what level of danger are you in?
Oh, right. Yes. Good question. Yes. So if they don't overlook it, it usually doesn't get to that point until we actually rub shoulders in a wrong way with someone that has some connection to authority. So there is a lot of fear. I remember the first time I went there for an missionary orientation. It was at a coffee shop. And the first thing that they said was, if they know that you are a foreigner, they're going to assume that you're a missionary. And it's a great question also. I'll get to that. Christianity is an imperialistic agenda, meaning that if we're spreading Jesus and the gospel and converting people to Christ, they're thinking that it's more of a political agenda, in the same way that sometimes religion is has been a political agenda in the past. So they are kind of like telling the Lao people, okay, so Christianity is of the enemy. Okay, a very tangible enemy in the form of foreigners that are coming to you with aid or help, things like that. So if we were to be deported, the embassy does a lot to help in the capital, of course, and we are trained to make sure that we pretty much go with what they tell us to do. Yeah, there we go. The Lao people that actually work with the foreigners in those kind of situations are the ones who are going to be suffering more. They'll either go to jail or who knows what's going to happen to them. So for them, yes, there's a big risk for the native Lao people to work with people like us if we are kind of in danger of having done something that the government really sees that shouldn't have been done in the first place. So we've heard a handful of missionaries go across the border. Thailand, a very open country to the gospel. Well, to a certain extent, but they're not going to cause persecution. So a lot of people go just right across the border. The next slide, actually, let me see. No, actually, the slide that was just up there, sorry. It kind of has like that outline of Laos. Vientiane is kind of like in the very border of Laos and Thailand, which is right underneath it. So we are bordered with Thailand. If we have a problem, we just go straight into Thailand. And we have some missionaries who pretty much set up churches right across the border as soon as they got kicked out. A lot of resources are waiting for us out there if we're ready to smuggle them in. So there's a lot of good stuff going on because of the fact that we're right on the border. If we're in the countryside, it might be a little rough about how people are treated. Yeah, so we haven't heard any personal stories yet, but I'm sure there is stuff going on that we don't know about. Thank you for that question, yeah. We do. Lao gospel music is still they're still making it. They're still making their own gospel music. But at the same time, they're singing some of the same hymns. Jesus Paid It All. What other songs? I mean, like the basic hymns that we know, they're singing it in their worship services. And it's a great thing. It's a great thing, but sometimes I hope it's not too much of a great thing where they don't own up to their Lao cultural style of worship words, and their manner of how they're going to use their language to praise God. But at the same time, we love knowing how they still know about Chris Tomlin and all these other big contemporary names as well. A lot of it is borrowed from Thailand too, because a lot of Christianity has moved forward in Thailand. I don't know in terms of numbers or statistically, but in Thailand there's a lot of praise music that has been translated into Thai language, and everyone in Laos knows Thai language. And because the culture and the language, even the characters, are very similar, close to like 80% or so. So there's a lot of bleeding over that happens, which is great.